you can really weave mindfulness in some respect into any of the frameworks that you go through in the book. But can we talk about a little bit about how mindfulness is a useful way of getting comfortable with discomfort? Because a lot of the times when we identify our values and formulate the actions that we need to take to get in line with those values, the actions feel really uncomfortable. They trigger passengers, and that's when people start to withdraw from their intentions. But mindfulness won't erase that discomfort, but it will at least give us enough kind of disidentification with it that we can move forward. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure, for sure. And I'm glad you're leading with mindfulness is getting comfortable with discomfort. A lot of people hear mindfulness, for the general public, they think, oh, it's meditation, right? And meditation is the most studied, the most ancient way of building your mindfulness muscle, right? Mindfulness is a way of using your mind, right? It's a cognitive skill, if you will, some people call it. The function of mindfulness in your life is certainly not to get really good at sitting on a cushion, right? It is to get familiar with the tendencies of your mind and your body, right? So when you're meditating and then, there's noise outside, you can notice your mind get pulled to that and then judging that, and that's not as it should be. And then your body gets tense. And so building your mindfulness muscle in the context of building a life you want is to get really good at noticing what's getting in the way of you doing those things you say you want to do, or those, moving or being the kind of person you say you want to be in a non-judgmental, it's kind of like being your own therapist, right?
Yeah.
In this non-judgmental way where you can kind of go like, I'm noticing that I tend to get so wrapped up. So an example would be, what was that? I would just remember in a time once where I asked someone why they weren't doing something, and their immediate default was all the reasons it wasn't going to work. Right.
Oh.
And so that clued me into, that's why we're not making progress on this, because that's exactly what happens. And so that if we do an exercise today is something I was thinking that we could do as a little experiential practice for listeners.
For sure.
I could jump into it now, or we can.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's all theory and concept and me going blah, blah, blah. If I'm telling you about it, you really have to feel it in your bones to kind of recognize what's going on with mindfulness. So I have two ways of going at this. So for listeners or for ourselves, we can either, sort of have a gaze down and, sort of just a contemplative moment as I walk you through something. Or if you're listening, you can write this down on a piece of paper. As we do in the book, we have that form called the dashboard form, right?
Yep.
That is like reading the dashboard of your mind, body, vehicle. So I'd like everyone to bring to mind something that you've been wanting to get started on in the post-COVID world, something that, is related to whatever value you identified in whatever domain, right? So first think about the domain you thought about earlier, like what's an important area of your life you want to focus on? And then how do you want to show up? What kind of person do you want to be? Now I'd like you to think about what kinds of stuff does that kind of person do, right? What kinds of behaviors? And I don't mean I'm supportive or I'm busy. I want you to really think about a specific thing. I'm scheduling meetings. I'm meeting with girlfriends. I'm, whatever those behaviors are. So I'm going to give you like a few seconds to think about that. You can either be jotting it down or thinking about it in your head. Okay. So when you think about those scenarios or those actions of what does a person who values what you are thinking about valuing, what kinds of actions do they take? Now, when you think about yourself taking those actions, let's just visualize yourself. That would be the facts. That would be that first box on the dashboard form that we may put in a link to in the show notes.
Definitely.
So if you were doing those things, all right, so visualize yourself doing it, who you'd be doing it with, what does it entail? What are you wearing maybe? How long is it? Think about that whole scene. And as you have that scene in your mind, what's the next thing that shows up? What are the thoughts that show up about that? What is that going to say about, what does that mean? Are you noticing anything like, gosh, that means I got to actually put pants on again, or does it mean like what comes up for you really? So, and there's some exercises that, again, in the show notes, like I have videos that are linked from QR codes in my book that walk you through an exact meditation like this, but just in the essence of time, I'm just going through it quickly. I want you to think about what goes through your mind. What emotions come up? Is there some anxiety and trepidation, maybe some dread that comes up? And how does that feel in your body? So we've gone through what are the thoughts? What are the emotions? What are the bodily sensations, dread, tension, heart palpitations, maybe even? And what is the impulse? What is the impulse to sort of, avoid thinking about this? An impulse can, by the way, be a thought or a behavior, right? You can behaviorally go like, oh, let me just go. I need to get something to eat first. I need to get something to drink first. But this is how we start to become self-aware, right? What is exactly the process between stimulus, I want to take an action, and response, I'm procrastinating. What's the workflow, if you will, of your mindfulness system, right? Like there's input, and it goes through this sort of underground, unconscious process of, thoughts, emotions, bodily sensations, and impulse at the other side that go so fast that we miss it. And so hacking into that system with mindfulness allows us to start being more skillful with each piece of that experience, which we'll talk about when we talk about an actual physical skill. So you start with that self-awareness, really building that kind, loving, self-compassionate self-awareness. And then we, on the other side, say, and then, in the book, there's a last form that lets you say, oh, my pattern of these dashboards tends to look like this. Here are the skills I need to override that automaticity. So I'll be more fluid and integrated and less constrained and automatic and reactive, more responsive and less reactive.